Sarawak amat kaya dengan tempat-tempat yang menarik. Sejarahnya tidak kurang pula. Titik permulaan sejarah kemerdekaan Sarawak berlaku setelah berakhirnya Perang Dunia Kedua. Kepulangan Raja Brooke ke Sarawak selepas perang telah mengubah lanskap politik negeri ini. Satu keputusan besar yang dibuat oleh Raja Charles Vyner Brooke semasa itu mencetuskan kesedaran politik awal di kalangan masyarakat Sarawak. Jom ikut saya melawat lokasi-lokasi yang berkaitan dengan peristiwa ini. Saya Tony Yusof, anak Sarawak, bumi Kenyalang. Sebelum saya mencecah usia 50, saya telah membuat satu bucket list untuk mengenali asal-usul negeri kelahiran saya dengan menerokai beberapa lokasi bersejarah yang berkaitan dengan pembentukan negeri ini. Ini adalah perjalanan saya di dalam Pejalai Kamek Orang. Cuaca baik hari ini, sesuai untuk saya berjalan-jalan dengan motor saya. Hari ini saya dijemput untuk melawat satu rumah Melayu lama yang sangat unik. Jom kita ke sana untuk berjumpa dengan pewaris rumah pusaka berkenaan.
Morning, Buat Dayang.
Hi, Tony. Alhamdulillah, come. Welcome to Darul Mazia. Selamat datang.
Thank you. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. Sila naik.
Thank you. Kacat rumah kita.
Oh, makasih. Sila.
Thank you. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm like traveling through time ke apa tu?
Something like that lah. Come take a seat.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
I feel very special in this living room.
Alhamdulillah, makasih.
Has it always been like this?
Yes, Tony. But last time, I believe it was in 1930s or something like that.
Right.
My great-grandfather walled it up.
Oh, you mean it used to be open?
Yeah, it was a veranda actually.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
The veranda was like from there all the way to the other side.
And it was 1930s, you say it was changed?
It was walled up in 1930s, I believe. Yeah.
Right. So 150 years old means 1880s?
Yeah, roughly.
Right.
Probably late 1800s. It was probably lately 1800s. Yeah.
Puan Dayang merupakan generasi keempat yang mewarisi rumah ini. Suasana dalam rumah ini membuatkan saya terkenang zaman dahulu. Tempat ini penuh dengan peninggalan lama, bagaikan muzium mini.
So this, I understand that Darul Mazia was that's the name of the house, right?
It's the name of the house.
Was used as a center for the Anti-Cession movement?
Yeah, it was in the beginning. It was the beginning. The Anti-Cession was headed by Datuk Patinggi Ali.
Okay.
And so is my grandfather, Abang Haji Jaya, is also with Datuk Patinggi Ali. The first few meetings of Anti-Cession was held here.
Okay.
After that, that's why there's a tugu was being built up. It was being erected outside the Darul Mazia, in front of the Darul Mazia actually.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have a look at it later.
Okay. Right.
After that, they kind of like move it back to rumah Datuk Patinggi Ali.
Interesting. Puan Dayang, I can't take my eyes off the items you have on the table right
The
now.
crease.
Yes, namely the Chris. Boleh
Okay.
tanya tak?
Sure, come. I'll show you. All right. The one on top of the table belonged to my great-grandfather.
Okay. Boleh tanya tak?
Boleh, kan? This is one of them. I'll take... You want to see?
Yes,
Okay,
please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. There you go.
Wow. Okay.
This belongs to my great-grandfather.
Nice. And your great-grandfather must have been somebody in the Brooke administration or something?
Oh, yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
He was one of the ministers in the ministries of Brooke during that time, back in
Right.
the 20s.
Okay,
And
okay,
late, early 30s, yeah.
Right.
Melalui foto-foto yang saya dapat lihat, saya sedar bahawa banyak perjumpaan telah diadakan untuk menentang penyerahan Sarawak ke pihak British.
This is how the house looks like way back then.
1929. And which one is your great-grandfather?
Here. This is him, Datuk Bentara Abang Haji Hashim.
Okay. Right. So yeah, you can see it's a veranda back then. Yeah.
Yep, it's
So
a
this is-
veranda. The way we're standing now, it's a veranda.
And it was changed in the 30s, you said, right?
Yeah, it was wall up in the 30s, probably, for the Anti-Cession. I'll show you the picture of it when it was back in 1949. Let me see. Here it is. That is during one of the first few meetings for the Anti-Cessions.
Right.
This involved my grandfather, Abang Haji Jaya. So this is how it looked like back in 47 when it was wall up, Tony. The first few meeting was here for the Anti-Cession. Then it was back to Datuk Patinggi Ali's house, which is Darul Kunia.
Okay.
Jalan Haji Jahan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
This way.
I can never get over this. The architecture is so impressive. It's a-
Kacak kan? Yeah, it is. Such an old
very,
house.
very romantic.
Right, come this way.
Come.
Seterusnya, Puan Dayang membawa saya ke halaman luar Darul Maziah untuk melihat tugu peringatan gerakan anti penyerahan.
There you go, Tony. The monument, Tugu, it was built in 1948.
I see it. Yes,
Yeah.
1748.
Right, it's
So
in Jawi.
1st of July 48, and the rest is in Jawi, which I
Yeah.
cannot read.
Di sinilah tempat bermulanya gerakan yang menyedarkan orang Sarawak bahawa negeri mereka bakal dijajah oleh British setelah menikmati kebebasan di bawah naungan ketiga-tiga Raja Brooke selama lebih 100 tahun. Saya perlu mengupas banyak lagi tentang peristiwa ini. Mari, ikut saya ke lokasi seterusnya. Saya dalam misi mengenali dengan lebih lanjut tentang gerakan anti penjarahan yang berlaku selepas Perang Dunia Kedua di Sarawak. Saya akan berjumpa dengan seorang pesara dan juga anak kepada salah seorang yang terlibat dalam gerakan anti penyerahan.
Hi, good morning, Tan Sri.
Good morning. Nice having you.
Nice meeting you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having this meet. So, Tan Sri, where should we have a chat?
You like to go to the jetty?
I would love to. It looks really good.
All right.
Come. What led the Malays to be, a part of the anti-cession movement? I mean, what sparked it?
A question of independence, really. Sarawak was independent under the Brooke. The Brooke came here as individuals, not part of the British government, no.
Yes.
No, they came to rule Sarawak on their own, in fact, And Britain recognized them as the rulers of Sarawak. I think I can say the majority of the Malays were anti-Cessionist. The other native people, they were not really involved. They're ekot-ekot saja.
Right.
The Chinese, as usual, in the middle, they didn't really care which way they go.
Menurut Tan Sri Safri, masyarakat Melayu telah memainkan peranan penting dalam pentadbiran Sarawak. Mereka juga adalah tulang belakang jentera kerajaan Brooke sejak tahun 1841. Tentangan hebat mereka terhadap keputusan Raja Charles Vyner Brooke menyebabkan fungsi kerajaan ketika itu terjejas teruk.
After the war, things changed. The Brookes returned, but then they decided they couldn't carry on running Sarawak. The Brookes handed Sarawak over to the British. The Brookes did not have enough money to continue running Sarawak.
I suppose a lot of people were very angry about Vyner.
Of course, the people regarded the Brookes as betrayers. Vyner Brooke, especially the one who was responsible for handing Sarawak over to the British. Vyner Brooke is a third Raja.
So Tan Sri, you mentioned earlier that your father was relieved of his civil duties at the time when this was a ruling.
And people like myself and my father and my uncle's family, they all had to resign from government service. They had to resign. Circular number 9.
Can you elaborate on this circular number 9?
Circular number 9 was a government ruling that no civil servants were to involve themselves in politics under that circular. So that's the rule.
Right. This was the ruling that got your father relieved of his duties at the time.
They had to leave the service. If they didn't leave, they would be sacked anyway.
Gerakan anti penyerahan telah bermula pada tahun 1946 sampailah 1949. Pada tahun 1949, berlakunya peristiwa berdarah apabila seorang Governor British telah dibunuh dan ini telah mengubah nasib pergerakan ini.
So Tan Sri, I would like to know more about the assassination of Sir Duncan Stewart. Now, I understand that was the peak of the Anti-Cession movement.
Right. Malays tend to change after a shock. The assassination of Duncan Stewart could be described as a shock to the Malay people. In other words, it's the extreme, And being anti-secessionist is one thing, but killing somebody is another. So Duncan was walking past a group of assembled school children inspecting when Rosie Dobby, a young teacher, teenager, struck him down. Then he was brought to the hospital. He died in the hospital in Singapore. Now, that was a shock, I think, to most Malays about killing. And you could say because of British response to this killing, that they were very drastic about it. So the Malays began to, tone down.
The other shock about it was that Rosie Dobby was only 16.
16, yes, teenager, yes.
But he was coaxed by the group, which is called Rukun 13.
And especially after Rosley was hanged.
Was the execution in public or?
Not in public, no. In jail, I think.
Okay.
He was hanged in jail.
Sesi borak sejarah bersama Tan Sri Safri ini telah banyak memberi saya perspektif tentang gerakan anti penyerahan ini. Saya cukup menghargai gerakan ini kerana ia telah menyedarkan masyarakat setempat tentang betapa pentingnya kesedaran politik di tanah air kita. Seperti biasa, saya tak lupa untuk mengambil gambar Tan Sri sebelum ke destinasi seterusnya. Darul Kurnia. Bangunan ini merupakan ibu pejabat dan juga tapak perhimpunan gerakan anti penyerahan di Sarawak suatu ketika dahulu. Walaupun ia kini telah dijadikan sebuah sekolah, melalui rentetan peristiwa bersejarah di sini, semangat perjuangan di sebaliknya masih dapat dirasa. Saya tak dapat luangkan masa lama dekat sini. Tapi sekurang-kurangnya, saya dapat juga menjejakkan kaki ke tapak bersejarah ini. Bila saya lihat pembangunan di Sarawak ini, saya amat kagum dengan apa yang telah dicapai oleh negeri ini. Ekonomi, ketenteraman, gaya hidup, keagamaan, semuanya sangat seimbang dan hampir sempurna. Saya percaya pencapaian ini ada kena-mengena dengan perjuangan tokoh-tokoh terdahulu di negeri ini. Balik kepada perjalanan saya hari ini, ia tak akan lengkap tanpa mengetahui peranan keluarga Brooke dalam peristiwa pergerakan anti penyerahan pada tahun 1940-an.
Mr. Brooke.
Tony,
How are you, mate?
how are you doing? Nice to see you again.
Good to see you. Okay, I want to know about the Anti-Cession movement now.
Okay.
And, why did Charles Viner Brooke cede Sarawak to Britain, basically?
It's a big question. We wouldn't say that he ceded it. We say that he purported to cede it or he attempted to cede it.
Right.
But ultimately, the mechanism by which Sarawak became a colony was by annexation, which is basically the invasion or the annexation of the country by a foreign state. What Viner did was he gave legitimacy to that act. He sort of signed a piece of paper that gave that some sort of PR or legitimacy. As to why he did that, he was under an enormous amount of pressure. He had been sort of less interested in Sarawak over the years. Towards his retirement, he was no longer really directly ruling it, sort of handed over to the next generation. And they went to Viner and they said, unless you sign this, unless you agree to this, we're going to take unilateral action. So he saw an opportunity to preserve his position in some way.
He obviously didn't have the same ambition Charles did.
He didn't have, no, you're right, he didn't have the same ambition or the same vision that Charles had had. And he certainly didn't see Sarawak as something that was permanently going to be, under the Brookes. And I think colonization was a means of him in some ways, handing that on and feeling like he'd passed on the responsibility. But of course, the other side of the family felt that was deeply irresponsible. So there was a huge rift in the family as a result of this.
Right.
Jason kemudiannya memberitahu saya tentang betapa rumitnya perhubungan antara Charles Viner, adiknya Bertram dan anak Bertram, Anthony. Walaupun begitu, tentangan terhadap cadangan meletakkan Sarawak di bawah naungan British tetap diteruskan.
So my grandfather had been heading the provisional government in exile during the war, representing Sarawak's interests with the Allies and the planning for the liberation of Sarawak. And he said he would fight tooth and nail to ensure that the people of Sarawak could decide what form of government they wanted to have after the war. And so he received a lot of telegrams from indigenous leaders and the Council of Legree asking him to come and see for himself what people in Sarawak really wanted. And so he responded to that. I mean, that's all he felt he could do. It was his duty to respond to that. So he and his father engaged then with what became the Anti-Cession movement, the independence movement of Sarawak.
I understand that Anthony Brooke was barred from entering Sarawak by the Colonial Office at the time. Why was this?
Yeah, it's a good question. If you see over here, as he was leading the Anti-Cession movement, it was inconvenient for the British to have him. They certainly didn't want this agitator, as they saw it, in Sarawak as a rallying point for dissatisfaction with colonialism or with the colonization of Sarawak. So they thought, well, they could just ban this guy from this country of which he had previously been ruling. They eventually lifted the ban on Singapore. So there was a house called Sarawak Lodge in Singapore where they flew the Free Sarawak flag, and he would get delegations of members of the former Council Negri and other sort of community leaders in the anti-cession movement coming to Singapore to strategize on Newton Road about, how to run this civil disobedience, this non-violent resistance movement to colonization.
Was there a political and economical development when Sarawak was a crown colony?
Yeah, I think inevitably. The British were only here for 17 years, so quite a short stint, really. I think they were under a lot of pressure to bring about some changes. They had, taken Sarawak against local wishes. It was actually, along with Sabah, their last ever colonial acquisition at a time where they were being pushed out of their other colonies around the world. So they were under pressure to bring about some big changes. So there was investment, there was investment in education, there was investment in infrastructure, getting logging going in a big way. That was one of the big legacies of British rule. So I think there was also quite a hurried move towards preparing people for democracy within, whether it was Malaysia or North Borneo Federation or whatever the ideas they were developing at the time as they were being inevitably pushed out of this part of the world. So there was a sort of educating people in what democracy was and getting maybe some local leaders trained up to take over the reins after the British withdrew.
Right.
Kisah gerakan anti penyerahan yang saya belajar dalam misi saya hari ini telah menyedarkan saya betapa susahnya perjuangan orang-orang dahulu untuk mencapai kebebasan bagi tanah air ini. Walaupun sebahagian daripada kerajaan Brooke, Anthony terutamanya telah banyak berjasa untuk menggalak semangat merdeka di kalangan rakyat Sarawak. Sebelum saya akhiri perjalanan saya hari ini, saya ingin mengambil gambar makam Anthony Brooke yang merupakan datuk kepada Jason. Kita jumpa lagi di perjalanan saya yang seterusnya.